There is a word that two entire continents carry. 1 billion people say it. Every map on Earth is printed with it. America. You have said it thousands of times in your life. But here is something almost nobody realizes. The man it was named after wasn't the first to reach these shores. History classes barely mention him. Yet somehow, his name ended up on 2 continents. Forever. And the strangest part? He never asked for it. He never chose it. The name was placed on the world by someone else. A man sitting at a desk in a small town in Europe, far from any ocean. This is the story of one of history's most influential naming accidents, and the men who got remembered, renamed, and forgotten because of it. Think about it for a second. Every kid learns the same sentence. In 1492, Columbus sailed across the ocean. Columbus, not America. Columbus. So if he's the name everyone remembers, why don't we live in the United States of Columbia? Why isn't this continent called Columbia? Why is a whole hemisphere named after a man most people can't even picture? To understand that, you have to go back. And what you find is stranger than any mistake you could invent. Start with the man everyone knows, Christopher Columbus. In 1492, he sails west. Weeks of open water, no land. His crew is scared. Some of them are ready to turn back, some of them worse, and then finally, land. In European history, Columbus is remembered for opening the age of transatlantic exploration. But here's what most people never learn. Columbus didn't think he'd reached a new continent at all. He was sure he'd reached Asia, the Indies, the rich trading lands of the East. That was the whole reason he sailed in the first place. So when he landed on islands full of people who had lived there for thousands of years, when he called them Indians, a name based on a place thousands of miles away. And this is the part that changes everything. Columbus never let go of that belief. He crossed the ocean 4 times. 4 dangerous voyages. And right up to his death, he insisted he had reached Asia. He refused the idea that these were lands Europe had never mapped. He died in 1506 still convinced. Think about what that means. The explorer whose name everyone remembers didn't understand what he'd reached. He was holding the answer and he pushed it away. So the door was left open. Open for someone else to walk through and give it a name. His name was Amerigo Vespucci, an Italian, a merchant, a navigator, and on paper far less famous than Columbus. He wasn't the first to cross the ocean. He wasn't the captain people remember. But he did something Columbus never did. He became one of the first Europeans to argue that these lands were not Asia, but a part of the world no one back home had recognized as separate from it. Not a shortcut to the east, a whole other world. And here's a small mystery that hides inside this whole story. If the continent was named after Vespucci, why America? Why his first name? Amerigo. Why not his last name? Why aren't we living in Vespuccia? Hold on to that question because the answer tells you something about how the old world thought. The continents Europe already knew. Europa, Asia, Africa, they were all written as Latin names, all of them feminine. So when it came time to name this new land, they didn't reach for Vespucci. They reached for Amerigo. They turned it into Latin, and they made it match the others. America. But even that wasn't Vespucci's doing. He never picked it. Someone else did. Because here's the thing about that new world idea. Many historians argue about how much of it was truly Vespucci. Some of the letters carrying his name may have been exaggerated. Some may have been rewritten or partly shaped by others to sell copies. The exact details of his voyages are still debated today. But for the story of the name, it almost doesn't matter. Because the idea landed. The idea that this was a new world spread faster than any single ship ever could. Columbus is remembered for the voyage, but the story around Vespucci's name carried the meaning. And in the world of ideas, meaning is the thing that sticks. You'd think the story ends here. The land was reached. The new world had its meaning. The name was on its way. But here's the strangest part. The story still wasn't over. Because the man who actually put America on the map later tried to undo his own decision. His name was Martin Waldseemüller, a mapmaker. He was not an explorer. He may have never even seen the ocean. He worked in a small town in the mountains of Europe, far from any sea. In the year 1507, he and a few scholars sat down to do something ambitious. A map of the entire known world. And when they reached the strange new lands to the west, they needed a name. So they wrote it. Across the southern part of that newly mapped continent, America. Then they printed it. Hundreds of copies. And the map traveled. Across borders, into libraries, into other mapmakers' hands, and every one of them copied that name. America. And here's the twist that makes this almost hard to believe. Waldseemüller changed his mind. On his later maps, just a few years after he took the name off, he removed it. Like he'd realized he might have gotten it wrong, but by then it was too late. The word was already out in the world. Already copied, already spreading, already impossible to stop. Other map makers kept using it, and slowly the name crept up from the south and across the northern continent too, until it covered everything. One man, at one desk on one day, wrote a single word, then tried to take it back. But by then, the name had taken on a life of its own. Now stop for a second and think about what that really means. The name of your continent. The word on your passport, your money, your maps. It wasn't chosen by a nation, it wasn't voted on. It wasn't earned on a battlefield. It came from one mapmaker's choice that nobody could reverse, and it makes you wonder. How many things that feel permanent, how many names and borders and words we treat as simply true, are really just the accident of one person one day who wrote something down and never managed to take it back? Who actually decides what the whole world remembers? Because it's almost never the person who did the work. Look at how it ended for these three men. Columbus crossed the ocean. Vespucci understood what it meant. Waldseemüller wrote a single word. 500 years later, only one of their names became the name of two continents? Not the explorer everyone remembers, not the map maker who actually wrote it, but the navigator who never even asked for it. History doesn't always remember the first person to arrive. Sometimes it remembers the idea that changed how people saw the world. Subscribe? Because the biggest stories in history aren't always about the people we remember. They're about the ones we forgot.